before we get into today's video, I wanted to just point out that there are still 2 days left on the Shield Archive event, but I've been really unlucky. So if you're in the same boat as I am, don't feel bad. It's happening to me. It's happening to at least one other person. I've gotten the masks. I farmed those out. They gave the headsets for free, but I've been completely unable some days to get any shield drops, despite doing 20, 30, 40 dimension missions. And just to prove it, you can see that I'm already at the, I've already gone through all of the regular rewards, all of the contribution rewards. So I don't know if I'm just been unlucky, but yeah, it hasn't been going too well for me. However, what has gone pretty well for me this update, if you followed along through the gambling and through the anniversary stuff in the live stream, is crafting for brilliant CTPs. I've gotten like 3 for 11, and I'm very, very happy being able to craft multiple CTPs for different content. But one thing that I've had a lot of questions on, way more than the 9th year anniversary, way more than the 8th year anniversary, which I think is pretty indicative, is a lot of people asking, should I craft a mighty CTP? And I think this is a really interesting question, because it doesn't create as much of a gap, or as much, it doesn't put as much of a strain on your inventory and your drop rate as brilliants do, right? Trying to go for a brilliant, one, it's a 1 in 5 chance. Secondly, in order to reach a 1 in 5 chance, you have to sacrifice 5 CTPs that you weren't normally going to sacrifice, right? So you just burn them, poof, they're gone. For most players, they're not going to get to that point, right? Maybe over a long period of time, they're going to farm 5 transcendences or 5 patience, but they're not going to want to burn, like a psycho like me. They're not going to want to destroy authorities or energies or rages or any of these high value CTPs. So they're only going to do it on the very, very low value stuff to use as fodder. But on the other hand, for a mighty, if you just wanted to reforge a mighty, I just take 1 greed and I take another greed and I'm done. That's it. That's all I have to do. Boom, you're done. You can press that button, that 50 button, and you're done. Now you have 0 chance to get a brilliant, but you have a 100% chance to get a mighty. And even when you go for the 20% chance to get a brilliant, you have an 80% chance to get, or a 79% chance to get a mighty. So a lot of people ask, like, hey, I have a bunch of rages. Should I just smash 2 together and make one mighty? And that's a really good question. So I wanted to tackle this today and sort of give you my thoughts on when I think an account should consider pushing into the mighty territory. And it definitely matters. There's a different sort of weight, I think, applied to different types of accounts. So what I would say, first of all, is depending on whether you're a PvE or PvP focused account, that question is going to differ quite dramatically. Because I think for PvP accounts, you kind of don't have a choice. If you want to compete these days in PvP, you're going to need to at least bring mighty CTPs of Conquest and mighty CTPs of Greed to the table. Because the best metas, Null, Sentry, Wolverine, Thanos, Silver Surfer, Carnage, Adam Warlock, they all use those CTPs, right? Almost all of them, their best CTP is this, Conquest, or Greed. But it can never be the regular Greed, because the regular Greed doesn't have the ambush proc, doesn't have the super guard break immunity, doesn't have the reflect immunity. Same thing goes for the Conquest. It's not going to have the clash proc, it's not going to have the reflect immunity, it's not going to have the super guard break immunity. If you're a PvP player and you have 2 CTPs of Conquest, smash them together immediately. There's really no reason. There's no reason to ever equip a normal Conquest. Or I'm never going to equip a normal Greed. And unfortunately, if you have normal Greeds or normal Conquests or normal Authorities even, you may be better off unequipping them if you can for 50% off or 100% off, and then using them to craft, right? 1 mighty Authority is going to serve you more than twice as much as 2 regular Authorities will. Right, because a regular Authority is not going to have super guard break immunity. Well, actually, a mighty doesn't have either, but no, the steel proc does have super guard break immunity. It does, yeah. Okay, so it's not going to, right, a regular Authority is not going to have super guard break immunity, and it's not going to have that steel proc with the damage reduction, whereas a mighty does. And honestly, as much as the steel proc is useful for the damage reduction, what's really useful about the mighty CTP of Authority is the super guard break immunity. It gives your character a window of opportunity to attack back and not be constantly head rocked, unless they're one of the very few characters who have super guard break immunity natively, which even for Sentry, they took that away from him. So no one is safe in that regard. But so for PvP players, I think it's a pretty easy answer. I think, you're always better off crafting up to a mighty. Now, whether you want to craft up to a brilliant, that's obviously up to you. That's how much RNG you can stomach. I would never encourage people to gamble in that sense, but it's a no-brainer to me for PvP players go for a Mighty Conquest, go for a Mighty Greed, go for a Mighty Refinement. These three, go for a Mighty Authority. These 4 CTPs are not going to do you any good as regular CTPs, but as Mighties, they're going to give you a fighting chance, at the very least, if not the chance to actually win. I don't really include the regen in this because this is a very weak PvP CTP by today's standards, mainly because it does not offer you super guard break immunity in any way, shape, or form. So in my opinion, it's at an even lower level, and I would generally use this as fodder these days rather than crafting a Mighty Regen or a regular. Now, for PvE players, for the PvE side of things, which I think is the majority of players are wondering, should I craft a Mighty Rage? Should I craft a Mighty Energy or a Mighty Destruction? Or even a Mighty Judgment? I think those are the 4 like main options. I think it's a tougher conversation, and I think it requires more nuance. Because yes, a Mighty Rage, like of course Mighty CTPs are better than regular CTPs. They get extra stats, like you get an extra effect. Of course it's better. Like there's just no argument there, right? Unless you're rolling for the attack and defense, then you're not really getting an extra stat. You're just getting an extra line of an existing stat to bump you up a little bit. But for the vast majority of players, they want the type amplification, they want the beatdown proc, they want the strike proc, they want the enrage proc, right? So it makes sense there. They're always going to be better. There's no situation where I see sometimes people asking like, oh, is a regular rage going to be better than a mighty judgment? Well, no, right? It's not, unless you're talking about giving a mighty judgment to a non-elemental character, which you wouldn't do. But you know, for Ghost Rider, for example, people ask, oh, is a regular rage better than a mighty judgment? Well, no, because you're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing 1 apple to 2 apples or to 3 apples. It's just not going to be a fair comparison. So that's kind of the first thing to note there, is that yes, while all CTPs for PvE are not made equally, you know, Rage obviously has the most value these days across all content. Generally speaking, if a character is proc friendly, are they going to perform better with a Mighty Destruction or a regular Rage? Yeah, with a Mighty Destruction, because the strike proc is going to give them 100 to 120% increased damage to boss types, and that's like a huge jump, as well as the strike proc giving them 100% ignore dodge. Like these are just extra stats that a regular CTP can't make up for. But then when would you actually go ahead and start making Mighty Rages or Mighty Judgments? Well, I think it comes down to a judgment, pun intended, nice, that you have to make about your account and where you're trying to go with your account. Because some players like to build very, very high and very narrow, right? They want to build something like a Leaning Tower of Pisa, which doesn't have a lot of size to it, but it's very, very tall. So they just build up a few characters, and then to those few characters that they really, really love, they give their best CTP. They flood them with Odins and stuff like that. If that's the kind of player that you are and that's what you really enjoy doing, then you know you can craft a mighty relatively quickly, right? When you just have maybe 5 or 6 identical CTPs, you can crunch 2 down. But I would say at minimum the threshold is like 5 or 6, in my opinion. Obviously, you're free to do whatever you want. The very first 2 rages you can get, you can boom pump them into a mighty. But the reason why I would say at least 5 or 6 is once you have 5 or 6 equipped, you have 5 DPSs, right? You have 5 DPSs set. And that's really going to tie into something like World Boss, where you need 5 teams, right? You need to bring 5 teams to the table, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that can deal damage. So if all 5 of those have rages and then you get a 6th rage, oh, now my Thor is going to have a mighty, or Wanda's going to have a mighty, or whatever. So I think 5 or 6 is kind of like the very minimum baseline that you would consider reforging a CTP, a PvE CTP. Now it's different for different CTPs. You know, well, I don't have 5 rage. I have 4 rages, but I have 3 judgments and 2 energies. Okay, you can, you know, it's sort of like 5 cumulatively. Just remember that in order to reforge a rage, you're gonna need another rage. But I would use rage as kind of the baseline because it is the best CTP. But what if you're the type of player that doesn't like to build Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? Really, really tall, really, really narrow. What if you want to build wide like a pancake, and you want to build for like lots of different content? You want to use lots of different characters. That's a big reason why a lot of people play this game. There's 275 characters in the game. You want to build a lot of characters, you know. Even though I only need 5 characters for World Boss, you can see already in this brief snapshot, there's more than 6 rages here. There's more than 5 rages there. And if I go up, there's even more. And if I go down, there's even more. Now, do I use Captain Marvel very often? No, but sometimes I want to use Captain Marvel. That's the way that I play. So if I had fewer rages, what you would see is you would see regular rages equipped on characters here instead of mighties. For example, I left Shang-Chi's regular rage on. I'm not going to turn that into a mighty because I'm not using him right now. But at the time, it was really fun, even though mighties existed, to just use him with a regular rage because he's just really fun character to play. He's very quirky. He's very unique. He's got the buff tier 3. I just enjoy that. I can personally relate to the pancake players, the pancake account builders, more than I can to the Leaning Tower of Pisa players. It really just comes down to that as far as what you want. And so there is a difference between a mighty and a regular rage, for example, but I think for the vast majority of content, you're not going to notice it until you start to get very serious about the content. So that's sort of like the second reason, or the second sort of layer of the equation that I would say players should consider. The first being, are you a Leaning Tower of Pisa account builder, or are you a pancake builder? If you're a pancake builder, you want to wait till you have like 10, 15 rages before you start reforging or judgments or whatever. The second thing you want to think about is, how hard do you want to push these game modes? Because, for example, if you want to unlock all the World Boss Legends, but you just want to play stage 1, and you're never going to climb up to higher stages, you're probably not going to need crazy stacked builds. Likewise, if you want to play Alliance Battle and Alliance Battle Extreme and all this kind of stuff, right? You want to play Legend mode, whatever, but you're not really looking to push your scores into like crazy territory, right? You're not trying to compete for very, very high awards. You're just going in and you're trying to get all the reward. Well, maybe not all the rewards. That's crazy. But you're trying to get, you're trying to get the first, whatever, few million, whatever. You're just a humble, casual player, and that's fine. That's not a dirty word. There's nothing wrong with the word casual. Then you probably don't need mighties that desperately. On the flip side, though, there's always the flip side. If you do want to push ABX, ABL, in particular ABL, you absolutely need to get your hands on mighties. So that may accelerate. Maybe as soon as you get your 6th rage, you're reforging it. Boom, right? And then maybe you also want to throw in a few fodder CTPs to give your hand a try for a brilliant with a lower chance. Again, this is not something that I'm advocating for or I'm suggesting players do, but I'm just saying that there are the type of players out there who would rather risk it all for a chance at the glory than to like slowly build up their account. So you know what? They're going to be like, you know what? I only have these 2 CTPs. Boom, I'm going to burn them. I got a 6% chance at a brilliant. Let's do this. And boom, they're going to hit craft, right? And maybe they get a brilliant, and maybe they don't. But they sort of live and die on those moments because they're trying to make big swings, right? They're trying to make huge changes because they want to see a noticeable difference. They don't want that slow grind up to the top. And you kind of have to, your account kind of lives and dies on those decisions if you're that type of player. But likewise, if you really want to climb world boss, a regular rage is not going to cut the cheese. You're going to need to get a mighty. You're going to need to, build things up. You're going to need to get mighty insights and equip those on characters. Get your hands on a liberation or 2, etc. So that's the other thing to consider, really, is the type of player that you are in terms of game modes. So there's a roster consideration. How do you like to build your roster? And then there's a game mode consideration. How hard do you want to go on these game modes? The harder you want to go on these game modes as a PvE player, the more strain you're putting on your roster to come up with mighties, right, and to reforge them. But that's basically my take on it. I know it's a pretty logical, balanced take, and it doesn't have a lot of like tips and tricks for like, hey, do this for more odds. Unfortunately, it's all just like a big RNG game, and there's really no way to guarantee that you're going to avoid bad luck. The only way essentially is to never craft a brilliant, right? That's really the only way, is to only craft mighties, because you have a 100% guaranteed chance if you just smash 2 CTPs together with no fodder, you'll always get a mighty and you'll never feel like you're losing anything. But as soon as you start to introduce extra CTPs into the equation, there's a chance you're going to lose CTPs, you're going to lose value, and then that's when you can start to feel like, the game's not fair, I'm unlucky, this is not fun, and then of course, when the game's not fun, you stop playing. So that's just kind of my advice. I'm a little bit weary about recommending, like, yeah, go for that reforge, go for that brilliant. But as far as the mighties go, I think a baseline of 5 to 6 is a good place to start, and then just extrapolate from there based on your roster and game mode needs. So hopefully this video has been helpful, has been insightful to you guys. Hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think, if you've reforged any CTPs this update, and if you have, what was your luck like? Hopefully it was good. Thank you so much for watching the video. Smash the like button if you enjoy the content, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.